My grandmother used to say, "When the hyena laughs too loudly, it has not yet seen the lioness rise." I did not understand those words when I was a little girl sleeping on a straw mat in my grandmother's mud brick house, listening to rain drum against the tin roof. But I understood them on the night my husband tried to bury me in front of the whole family. It was my 42nd birthday. The garden behind our home glowed with lanterns hanging from jacaranda branches. The tables were dressed in white cloth and gold runners. The caterers moved like shadows, carrying platters of roasted fish, jollof rice, spiced lamb, and towers of tiny pastries dusted with sugar. A saxophonist played softly near the stone fountain, and the candles flickered in the evening wind. Everything had been arranged exactly the way my daughters wanted. "Mama, don't move," little Tundi had said an hour earlier, holding my wrist with both hands as if I might disappear. "You must stay right here when Baba arrives. He has a surprise." Her sister, Lindiwe, had been even more excited. She had nearly tripped over her own dress running from the dining room to the garden. "A big surprise," she whispered, grinning so wide her dimples showed. "Grandmother said tonight changes everything." I remember those words now, and the way they settled strangely in my chest. At first, I thought nothing of it. Children repeat what they hear. Mothers are trained to silence suspicion for the sake of peace. Wives even more so. I had worn a deep emerald gown that night, simple and elegant, with no heavy jewels except for one old bronze cuff on my right wrist. It was the only thing I had carried with me from my grandmother's house when I left for the city at 19. The metal was worn smooth by time. On the inside, etched so faintly only I knew it was there, were the words she had whispered to me the day she died. "A woman does not need noise to be powerful." Guests kept complimenting me. They said I looked radiant, graceful, untouched by age. Women I knew only through my husband's business circle kissed my cheeks and smiled too carefully. Men lifted glasses and praised the life I had built with him. His cousins laughed loudly near the drinks table. My mother-in-law floated through the garden like a queen inspecting a village she believed she owned. Madube had chosen a crimson gown and enough diamonds to blind the moon. To everyone else, she was charming. To me, she was a storm wrapped in perfume. She had spent 15 years reminding me that I came from nowhere, that I had no proper family name worth speaking of, that a woman raised by an old widow in a forgotten village should be grateful merely to stand near wealth. She never said these things where others could hear them clearly. Women like her never needed witnesses. They preferred poison measured in teaspoons. Still, I endured her. For my daughters. For the version of marriage I kept trying to protect long after it had stopped protecting me. Temba, my husband, was late. That was not unusual. Powerful men are always late to celebrations arranged by the women who love them. They think time itself bends toward their importance. At 9:15, the saxophonist stopped playing and the murmuring shifted. Faces turned toward the garden entrance. And there he was. Temba Dube entered wearing a black tailored suit, his silver cufflinks catching the light, his smile smooth and practiced. Beside him walked Madube, chin high, lips painted dark wine. On his other side was a woman I had never seen before, tall and polished, in a gold dress cut too boldly to be mistaken for modest company. She was young, younger than me by at least 15 years. Her hand rested lightly on my husband's arm. The whole garden changed temperature. You know that feeling when humiliation arrives before words do? When your body understands betrayal, one breath before your mind agrees? That was what moved through me then. Temba stopped beneath the lanterns and raised his hand for attention, as if he were the host. "My friends," he said, smiling at the crowd, "thank you for being here tonight. This evening is indeed special. But before we cut the cake, before the speeches, there is something that must be said openly." I felt Tandi's fingers find mine. Lindiwe leaned into my side. Temba turned toward me with that expression men wear when they want to be praised for cruelty, delivered calmly. "Zola," he said, "you have been part of my life for many years. You have cared for this home, raised my daughters well, and carried the title of wife with dignity. For that, I am grateful." Grateful. That word landed harder than an insult. Around us, people held their glasses mid-air, frozen between politeness and curiosity. Then, Madube stepped forward, holding a cream envelope sealed with wax. There are sounds you never forget. The rustle of legal paper is one of them. She extended it toward me and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Take it, my daughter. Sometimes the wise woman knows when to leave the seat before she is asked to stand." A few gasps rippled through the guests. I did not move. The young woman beside Temba lowered her eyes, pretending innocence, but I saw the triumph she could not fully hide. She had rehearsed that softness. Women like her always do. Temba continued, "This is not the place for a long explanation, but honesty is better than pretense. For some time now, my life has moved in a different direction. I have found companionship that reflects who I am becoming. We have agreed it is time to end what no longer works." We have agreed. That was the most insulting part. Not the betrayal, not the public spectacle. The lie that my silence had somehow become consent. Tandi looked up at me. "Mama?" she whispered, already trembling. Lindiwe's lower lip shook. "Why is Baba talking like that?" My daughters were standing in white dresses with matching braids and satin shoes. They believed we were waiting for birthday cake. Instead, they were watching their father peel their mother apart in public. There is a kind of pain so pure it makes the world go silent. I did not hear the fountain anymore. I did not hear the insects in the trees. I did not hear the breathing of the crowd. I heard only my grandmother's voice from many years ago. "When the day of dust comes, child, close your mouth and open your eyes." So I looked. I looked at my husband, who thought composure meant control. I looked at Madube, who already wore the smile of victory. I looked at the woman in gold, who believed she had arrived at the end of my story when she had only entered the middle of hers. Then I took the envelope. I opened it carefully, as if it were merely another birthday card among many. Divorce papers, prepared in advance. Property terms outlined with chilling confidence. Custody language written by someone who assumed money and public embarrassment would force me into surrender. A modest settlement. Temporary residence in a smaller house. Restrictions dressed as generosity. The kind of offer arrogant people make when they think they are dealing with a desperate woman. I read every line. I turned the last page. Then I folded the papers and slipped them back into the envelope. The guests waited for tears. That is what they came for, though they would deny it forever. Society is cruelest when it dresses itself as sympathy. Instead, I smiled. It was not a large smile, not dramatic, just enough to unsettle the room. "Is that all?" I asked. Temba blinked. Madube frowned. The woman in gold shifted her hand off his arm. I bent slightly and kissed Tandi's forehead, then Lindiwe's. "Go inside, my loves," I said softly. Ask Nana Ruth to bring you warm milk." "No," Tandi said immediately, clutching me harder. I knelt to their height. "Listen to me. Go inside. Wash your faces. Stay together. I will come to you soon." Children know more than adults think. They know when a voice is breaking under control. They know when a mother is speaking from a place deeper than fear. Lindiwe started to cry, but she nodded. Nana Ruth, our house manager, hurried forward and led them away. I remained kneeling for 1 second longer after they left, because that was the second I buried the woman everyone in that garden thought they knew. When I stood, I was no longer trying to save my marriage. I was calculating. "You chose my birthday," I said to Temba, my voice calm enough to make several people uncomfortable. "You chose my daughter's presence. You chose witnesses. So I assume you came prepared for honesty from every side." Temba laughed lightly, as though I were being emotional in a manageable way. "Zola, let us not turn this into drama." Drama. How quickly men rename the destruction they create when they want women to clean it quietly. Madube crossed her arms. "Take what is offered. Dignity is knowing when you have been replaced." I looked at her then, truly looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to soften my face. "No," I said. "Dignity is knowing the difference between being abandoned and being released." The young woman finally spoke. "I think maybe we should continue this privately." Her voice was smooth, educated, expensive. I almost pitied her. "Of course you do," I replied, "because public beginnings should not be spoiled by public facts." Now the garden was fully mine. Every eye belonged to me. But I did not say another word. Not there. Not yet. Instead, I handed the envelope back to Madube. "Tell your lawyer," I said, "to check the signatures on every company file before sending me anything else." Temba's expression changed so quickly it might have been missed by anyone who did not know him. But I knew him. I had studied his moods for 15 years the way villagers study the sky before harvest. That flicker in his eyes was not anger. It was confusion. And confusion, in a powerful man, is the first crack. I left the garden without another word. Upstairs, behind the locked door of my dressing room, I finally allowed myself to breathe like a wounded thing. My daughters were asleep on the sofa, curled together under a knitted blanket, tears still dried on their cheeks. Nana Ruth had done her best. One half-empty cup of milk sat on the side table. A doll lay face down on the carpet. I stood there staring at them, and that was the moment the pain truly arrived. Not because my husband had betrayed me, not because I had been humiliated, but because childhood had ended for my daughters in a garden full of lanterns and strangers. That is a debt no man should create. I sat beside them and touched their braids gently. Tandi always slept with one hand open. Lindiwe folded into herself when hurt. I kissed them both and then went into the small study connected to my dressing room. There, I opened the lowest drawer of an old carved desk. Beneath silk scarves and a box of letters sat a second phone. I switched it on. There was only one number saved. It rang once. Then a voice answered. "Madam Ndlovu?" "Prepare everything," I said. No surprise entered his tone. "Tonight?" "Yes." "Then it begins." His name was Kojo Mensah. Most people knew him as a private legal strategist who handled discreet family offices across 3 countries. What almost no one knew was that for 12 years he had served not my husband, but me. Because there are 2 kinds of women in this world. Those who are erased slowly, and those who learn quietly never to sign themselves away. I was born Zola Ndlovu in a village where maps ended and promises meant very little. My mother died when I was 6. My father had been gone long before that, swallowed by city ambitions and another family no one named in front of me. My grandmother, Gogo no Musa, raised me with cassava bread, river water, and discipline that felt like iron wrapped in prayer. We owned almost nothing, yet she carried herself like a woman who had lent dignity to the earth itself. She taught me numbers by making me count maize kernels. She taught me negotiation by sending me to market with 1 coin and expecting 2 onions, not 1. She taught me silence, not as weakness, but as storage. Noise spends power, she would say. Silence gathers it. When I earned a scholarship to university in Johannesburg, the village celebrated as if one of our own had been invited into the sky. I left with 2 dresses, 1 suitcase, and the bronze cuff on my wrist. I met Temba during my 2nd year. He was handsome in the way newspapers like, confident, generous when watched, ambitious without shame. He admired that I was intelligent, but only in the romantic stage when men mistake a woman's substance for an accessory to their ego. We married quickly. His family objected politely at first, then aggressively in private. I was too plain, too poor, too serious, too unknown. Madube wanted a daughter-in-law from old money, or at least from visible money. But Temba insisted. He liked winning. At the time, I mistook that for love. In the early years of our marriage, he brought me into several ventures. Small property acquisitions, export deals, agricultural supply contracts. He loved risk, applause, and speed. I loved structure, research, and numbers that could survive daylight. Whenever a deal succeeded, people praised his instinct. Whenever a problem arose, I fixed it quietly. It did not take long for me to understand 2 things. First, my husband was talented at appearing successful. Second, appearances are expensive to maintain. So while he built a public image, I built foundations. I established separate trusts. I purchased land through layered entities. I reinvested profits into logistics, cold storage, agricultural technology, and clean energy infrastructure across the region. Every document was legal, every account traceable, every signature deliberate. But my name was never where gossip expected to find it. I did not hide because I was afraid. I hid because visibility invites theft before maturity. Kojo helped structure the legal architecture. A retired banker from Accra handled cross-border financing. 2 sisters in Nairobi ran one of our most profitable agri-distribution arms. A widow in Gaborone managed mineral transport routes with ruthless precision. None of these people cared for parties, society pages, or the Dubé family's approval. They cared about growth, about discipline, about building things that still stand when loud men fall. By the time Temba believed he had become the primary force behind our wealth, the truth was far more dangerous to him. Much of what he enjoyed standing inside had my spine in its walls. The house we lived in sat on land held through a heritage trust he had never read carefully. The investment vehicles that financed his public expansion were tied to guarantees that required my continuity. 2 of his most celebrated companies depended on supply contracts from firms whose beneficial ownership ended in my private foundation. Even the gala board seat he bragged about at dinners came from a charitable network I had funded in memory of my grandmother. He knew pieces. He never knew the whole. That was his first mistake. The second was assuming kindness meant ignorance. After the birthday night, things moved fast. By dawn, the legal notices had been served. By breakfast, access restrictions were activated. By noon, 3 banks requested urgent clarification on ownership exposure tied to marital asset disclosures. By evening, an emergency board meeting had been called at Savannah Meridian Holdings, the crown jewel company Temba loved to describe as his legacy. He arrived there confident. He left pale. But the true unraveling happened 3 nights later. There was a charity gala at the Masego Grand Hotel, one of those polished events where wealthy people wear compassion like tailored fabric. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and camera flashes. Politicians, investors, journalists, socialites, diplomats, all gathered beneath one roof, ready to celebrate leadership and impact. Temba was meant to deliver the keynote. He attended with the woman in gold, whose name I had since learned was Ayanda Kumalo. She wore silver this time, perhaps to seem softer. Madube arrived separately, wrapped in black velvet, face hard with the kind of pride that mistakes denial for strategy. They all assumed I would stay away. Why would a disgraced wife attend her own replacement ceremony? That was the beauty of arrogance. It never budgets for revelation. When the master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone, the room settled. "We are honored tonight," he said, "to welcome not only our distinguished guests, but also the principal benefactor whose leadership has transformed rural enterprise development across Southern and West Africa. For years, she requested anonymity. Tonight, she has graciously agreed to be recognized." I watched Temba's smile dim by 1 degree. The screen behind the stage came alive with images. Solar cold storage units in farming cooperatives, women-led transport hubs, scholarship recipients in uniform, water systems installed in drought-prone districts, clinics supplied through logistics corridors, profits reinvested where no cameras linger. A logo appeared, the Nomusa Foundation. Then another, Ndlovu Strategic Holdings. Then a final line in gold lettering across the screen. Founder and Executive Chair, Zola Ndlovu. The silence in that ballroom was so complete it felt sacred. I stepped onto the stage in an ivory gown with a hand-woven midnight blue shawl draped over one shoulder. The bronze cuff remained on my wrist. I did not wear it for style. I wore it because the dead should witness the harvest of the seeds they planted. People rose slowly to their feet. Not everyone. Shock delays manners. I looked toward Temba. He had gone still in the way prey goes still when it finally sees the trap. Ayanda's face had drained of color. Madube looked as if the room itself had betrayed her. I reached the podium and let the applause come and go. Then I began. "When I was a child," I said, "my grandmother taught me that the tree with the deepest roots is often the one that makes the least noise in the wind." The room leaned in. I was not expected to stand here. Women from villages like mine are often expected to survive, to serve, to disappear politely into the successes of others. Many do. Some must. But every now and then, one learns to build quietly enough that those feeding on her labor never notice where the ground truly belongs. You could feel people connecting names, companies, dates, rumors, and realities all at once. I continued. For years, I chose privacy because I wanted the work to matter more than the face behind it. Tonight, I stand here for a different reason. Not recognition. Correction. A murmur moved through the tables. I did not raise my voice. I have recently been reminded that there are people who believe dignity can be assigned, revoked, or replaced by public performance. They are mistaken. Dignity is not given by marriage. It is not protected by wealth. It is not destroyed by betrayal. Dignity lives where self-knowledge lives. Cameras turned. Everyone in that ballroom knew exactly whom I was speaking to, though I never said his name. I let that restraint do its work. Then I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just truthfully. As of this evening, my legal team has completed a full disclosure of controlling interests connected to Ndlovu Strategic Holdings and its associated entities. Any public misrepresentation of ownership, executive authority, or marital asset structure will be corrected through the proper channels. Quietly where possible, publicly where necessary. That line landed like thunder wrapped in silk. The board chairman of Savannah Meridian, an elderly man who had ignored me for a decade at social events, was now staring at me as if meeting gravity for the first time. I finished my remarks with thanks to the women who had run my enterprises, the communities that had trusted our work, and the grandmother whose name crowned it all. Then I stepped away from the podium. And that was when the room broke. Journalists moved first, investors next. People rushed toward me with questions, congratulations, astonishment. Men who had once spoken over me now waited to be acknowledged. Women whose smiles had been cautious all evening came closer with something new in their eyes. Respect. Not the shallow kind attached to marriage, the real kind, the expensive kind, the kind paid for in patience, pain, and proof. Across the ballroom, Temba tried to approach me. Security, hired by the event and updated with new instructions an hour before, intercepted him with impeccable courtesy. "I need to speak with my wife," he snapped. One of them answered, "Sir, she has requested no disturbance." My wife. How quickly possession returns when power leaves. Ayanda disappeared before the dessert course. Madube remained seated, rigid as carved wood, unable to leave because leaving too quickly would admit collapse. Later that night, Temba called me 19 times. I answered none. He sent messages ranging from outrage to pleading to accusation. He said I had humiliated him. He said a marriage should not involve secrets. He said I had turned business into war. He said we could still resolve things privately. That was almost enough to make me laugh. Men will stab you in the square and then beg for privacy when the blood reaches their own shoes. The following week, the newspapers had a feast. Some called me mysterious. Some called me brilliant. Some called me ruthless. Only a few got close to the truth. I was simply prepared. There were audits, investigations, board restructures, asset freezes on ventures funded through misrepresented collateral, a pending fraud review tied to signatures Temba had made under assumptions no longer supported by fact. Social circles shifted, the way they always do when money changes direction. Invitations vanished from his side and multiplied on mine. Friends who had once adored Madube began discovering other plans. Ayanda, I heard, left the country for a time. Perhaps shame chased her. Perhaps practicality did. Mistresses love confidence until paperwork enters the room. Temba tried everything. He sent flowers. He sent old photos. He sent a voice note crying for the first time in our marriage. He waited outside the girls' school. That was the only thing that moved me to anger. I met him there, in broad daylight, beside the jacaranda-lined curb where drivers waited at pickup time. "You will not use my daughters as a bridge back into comfort," I told him. He looked exhausted, smaller somehow, like a suit still well-tailored but empty at the shoulders. "I made a mistake," he said. "A terrible mistake." "No," I replied. You made a plan. It failed. Those are different things. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, truth had reached him before language. The custody process was long, but not cruel. I refused revenge through the children. They deserved better than being weaponized. Temba received structured access under clear terms, supervised at first, then gradually expanded when consistency was shown. I would not become the kind of parent pain tries to create. Madube requested a private meeting 3 months later. Against Kojo's advice, I granted it. She came to my office at the foundation headquarters, where woven baskets from village cooperatives hung on white walls, and women moved through corridors carrying files, tablets, and purpose. She sat across from me in silence for almost a minute. Age had not softened her, but defeat had sharpened her honesty. I underestimated you, she said finally. I signed one document before answering. Yes, I said. She inhaled slowly. I thought you were lucky. A great many people do when a woman survives what should have broken her. She stared at the bronze cuff on my wrist. You could have destroyed him completely. I still could. Why haven't you? Because vengeance is hungry work, I thought. Because my daughters deserve a mother with a future, not just a wound. Because power proved is sweeter than power performed. But what I said was simpler. Because rebuilding my peace is more profitable. For the first time in all the years I had known her, Madube had no reply. Life after spectacle becomes very ordinary, and that is one of its greatest mercies. The girls and I moved into the house by the lake that had once been described in legal drafts as a fallback residence. It was smaller than the mansion, quieter, warmer, ours in a way the other place had never been. Mornings smelled of coffee and rain. Tandi learned to bake sweet bread that never rose evenly. Lindiwe started painting birds with impossible colors. We planted herbs in clay pots along the veranda and named a stubborn orange cat Minister because he behaved like a man who expected service. Sometimes healing looked like laughter over burnt pancakes. Sometimes it looked like therapy on Thursdays. Sometimes it looked like my daughters asking difficult questions at bedtime and me answering them without dressing truth in pretty lies. Did Baba stop loving you? Tandi asked once. I thought carefully before speaking. Love without respect becomes something else, I said. And when that happens, you must never stay where you are being asked to shrink. Lindiwe traced circles on her blanket. Will you marry again? Maybe, I said. Maybe not. A woman is not unfinished because she is alone. They seemed satisfied with that. Children do not need perfect answers. They need honest ones. 1 year after the birthday night, we returned to the village where I was raised. Gogo no Musa's grave sat beneath an acacia tree, overlooking fields gone gold with dry season light. I brought flowers from the city, though she would have laughed at the expense of them. The girls stood beside me in simple dresses, taller now, steadier. I knelt and pressed my palm to the earth. We are well, I whispered. The wind moved through the grass. For a strange second, I felt as though she were standing just behind me, thin and straight-backed, smelling faintly of wood smoke and wild basil. On the drive back, the girls slept in the rear seat. I watched the road unravel ahead of us, red dust lifting under the tires, horizon wide and unafraid. I thought about the woman I had been in that lantern-lit garden, the woman holding an envelope while strangers waited for her collapse. I do not hate her softness anymore. Softness kept my daughters warm. Softness built networks instead of noise. Softness smiled while reading legal papers because rage did not need to perform in order to be effective. People still tell the story wrong, of course. Some say I trapped my husband. Some say I lived a double life. Some say I revealed my empire out of revenge. Let them talk. People addicted to simple stories cannot bear a woman who is both loving and prepared, both wounded and formidable, both silent and sovereign. The truth is less dramatic and more dangerous. I did not become powerful the night I was betrayed. I simply stopped hiding the power I had built. And if there is a lesson in all of this, it is not that every woman must become wealthy or secretive or untouchable. No, the lesson is deeper. Learn who you are before someone tries to price you. Build something no insult can erase. And when the day comes that the room expects your tears more than your truth, give them neither. Give them your name, spoken clearly, held fully, owned completely. Because the hyena always laughs when it thinks the lioness is cornered. What it never understands is this: a lioness does not need to roar to end the hunt.